Here we go. Welcome back to another episode of the Sleep Edit podcast, episode 13, another mailbag episode. I'm Dr. Craig Canaperi,
And I'm Arielle Greenleaf.
and we are here to help tired parents and kids sleep better. I always enjoy these mailbag episodes because sometimes these are tough situations the parents are facing.
It's always a tough situation when it comes to sleep. I mean, if you're not sleeping, everything's tough.
Ariel, I guess there's a couple of ways that people send these to us. Some are
Yeah.
through our email address for the podcast, which is
The Sleep Edit Show at gmail.com.
one day I'll be able to remember
Which
that.
I need to apologize to people. I need to check it more frequently. There was a message from someone that was 9 days old, so I apologize for that. I will check it more frequently.
Yeah. And if you have signed up for my email list, I often send that out there too. So we have a loose clustering of topics. And the first questions were we had two questions about the concept of 24-hour sleep. One from a sleep consultant who says, I use this concept all the time in my practice, but would love to hear how you explain it. And a parent wondering what it is because he or she has seen parents refer to it.
Yeah. So, and I don't even know, I feel like this is something that you sleep doctors don't really in the same way as us sleep consultants, probably because you're solving more complicated issues than the things that we're working on. You know, we're dealing with normally developing children who have difficulty with their schedule or they're not sleeping correctly, and just a few fixes will work. One of the most critical pieces of what I do is determining 24-hour sleep. And what I mean by that is that we all have our own set of sleep needs. Craig, you may survive on 7 hours of sleep, and I may need 9 hours of sleep. Children are no different. And as you know, for normally developing children, there is a wide range of what is recommended and or normal. So if you're looking at an infant, there is a range between 12 and 16 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. That is a very wide gap, especially if you're stuck in you're in the frame of mind of wake windows. So if your child only needs 12 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, that means they need 12 hours of awake time during the day in order to enough sleep drive to fall asleep easily and take a restorative nap or have a restorative night. Likewise, if a child needs 16 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, that's only 8 hours of awake time. So those periods between sleeps are much smaller and shorter than those who have lower sleep needs.
And just to clarify, those really wide windows of normal sleep are in infancy, and they kind of narrow as kids move through childhood. Though if your child is on the high end of normal, they're probably going to continue to be on the high end of normal through childhood and adolescence. I feel like sleep clinic is full of young kids that don't need a lot of sleep and older kids that need that do need a lot of sleep. Because
that's interesting. Yeah.
If your kid is in the high end of normal, say as an infant, it can be 18 or even 20 hours of sleep. You feel like a parenting genius, right? Your kid's going to sleep no matter what. They take long naps. Whereas if your kid is in the low end of normal, you're really going to be struggling because it's not like you're going to get a nice 12 hours in a row. They're not mature enough to do that in early infancy. So you're going to have some fragmentation of sleep at night, and naps are going to be very difficult to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky part, and that's the magic of sleep consulting, is that if you're working with a good sleep consultant, they are going to look very closely at your child's sleep logs. And the first thing is we determine, okay, how much sleep is this child actually giving us in a 24-hour period? And it's really, really surprising how quickly you can determine that. A lot of the apps now are smart enough to show us trends, and we can see trends at 7 on the past week, 14 days, 30 days, 90 days. And it's really wild how consistent children are. The problem arises when sleep isn't distributed appropriately. And so someone may have a child sleeping 4 hours during the day, but then struggling to fall asleep at night and then only sleeping 8 or 9 hours overnight. And they're like, why is this so difficult? Well, because your child's sleeping too much during the day. We need to redistribute that to the nighttime hours, which means probably widening those wake windows so that the child is getting enough sleep drive, but also we're pushing some of that sleep into the overnight hours. It's really like it's almost like a math problem, honestly. It's
Sure.
like, let's figure this out. And I'd love to include in the show notes just some examples of what this looks like from a sleep data perspective. I have had a lot of children on the lower end of the spectrum in the last 6 months. So when I say lower end, I would say, like a 4-month-old that only needs 13 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. If you look at those wake windows that everyone's programmed to look at 4 months, they're like, oh, 2-hour wake windows. For little Johnny, that's not enough because he's only giving us 13 hours in a 24-hour period. So how are we making sure he's getting restorative sleep during the day, but also getting restorative sleep overnight? And that's the nuance there. And those windows can be different. Dispersing them can be different because some children need a longer wake time in the morning or a shorter wake time in the morning and vice versa at night. So that's where I think the magic of sleep consulting comes in. We do help to determine the 24-hour sleep needs, distribute appropriately, and that's very, very nuanced. As you know, sleep is very nuanced. So it's not something that I can say, well, if your child needs 14 hours of sleep, this is what their schedule should be, because it could be very different from another child that needs 14 hours of sleep.
So 24-hour sleep, it's just the amount of time that a child is going to sleep in 24 hours. And this is going to be fairly consistent. If a child's a good sleeper, bad sleeper. Bad
Correct.
sleeper, right? Like, I don't like the term bad sleeper, but that's how parents
Lower sleep needs.
do.
That's all it is.
What apps do you like for parents to track this?
Oh, man, that's a really tricky question because the app that I like to look at the most for data, I really dislike the other parts of the app. So I hate to speak about brands, but I really like the data I get from Huckleberry. I do not like the idea of their sweet spots because it doesn't pick up the nuance of each child. So it may suggest like a 10 p.m. bed or something like that because it's using like an algorithm to determine the schedule or the sweet spot. But from like a data perspective, it really shows me, it breaks it down. Here's how much daytime sleep they've been getting. Here's how much nighttime sleep they've been getting. Here's the total amount of sleep they've been getting. They do it on a daily basis, a weekly basis, bi-weekly, monthly, and 90 days. And it's extremely helpful.
So let's talk, because we're going to get into some now specific questions. And I will say, we do think about this concept in sleep doctor land. Honestly, the most common example we have is usually explaining to teenagers why taking long naps in the afternoon is problematic for their sleep.
Yeah.
Because I'll see kids who come home from school, they will sleep from like 2 in the afternoon till 8 o'clock at night, and then be up till 2 in the morning.
Right.
And feel like garbage in the morning. And that is like an inappropriate distribution of sleep. That's an extreme example.
I mean, I don't know that it's that extreme because I think if you don't know, you don't know. Like, so if you're a new parent and you just don't know and you're letting your baby sleep 6 hours during the day and then you're wondering why they're only sleeping 8 or 9 hours overnight, I just think that it would be helpful if there was more clear education around what you're talking about.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you decide the distribution of nap time mornings versus afternoons in an infant? Is it based on what's worked for parents? Because I feel like it's sort of like with little babies, it's almost as if parents are throwing everything at the wall and just seeing what sticks.
Right. Well, I feel like there's a lot of factors that go into it, unfortunately. I wish it was like so simple. But okay, say there's a child that this is tricky. Say I determine that a child can only do well with 2.5 hours of sleep during the day, and then maybe they're giving us 11 hours overnight or something like that. They give us 13.5 hours total during the day. What I like to do is
Sorry, 13.5 hours of wakefulness during the day?
No. If they need 13.5 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. So they're giving us 11 hours overnight and 2.5 during the day. I generally like to make that morning nap around an hour and then push the afternoon nap to an hour and a half so that we're pushing bedtime out a little bit later so that the 11 hours isn't putting down at 6 and going to bed or waking up at 5. We want to make sure we're getting to a normal wake up time for the child. So I'm trying to think. There was someone recently where the child only sleeps 10 hours overnight. No matter what, they just will only sleep 10 hours overnight. If you know that and you're trying to put them to bed at like 7 and wondering why they're waking at 5, well, we've got to shift bedtime a little bit later. And parents are often scared to do that because it goes against what normal wake windows are. And it can be scary because they're afraid that the child's going to be overtired. But I've never had 24-hour sleep distribution backfire on me, ever. In fact, parents are like, wow, I am amazed at what just happened.
So essentially, the levers parents can pull are when they put their kid down for naps, when they put their kids down for bedtime, I guess the number of naps, of course. And you can shorten a nap. No parent is like, oh my God, I have to wake up my like 3-month-old at 10 in the morning so I can get them to school, right? Like that's
Yeah.
more problem that people have. So I'm curious though, would you say that the kids that you see who have somewhat chaotic sleep patterns, or that's how it feels to the parents, that actually their nighttime sleep durations are relatively fixed, and what you're adjusting more is the timing of their nighttime sleep window and the timing of their naps? Or
Yeah. So, yeah, I think my goal is always 10 to 12 hours overnight.
okay,
I don't know. It may be anecdotal. I don't know where I read that or if I feel like I read 10 to 12 hours is a good goal to aim for. I sound so silly right now. I don't know where I read it, but it's always my goal to get 10 to 12 hours, and I've very rarely missed that goal. Usually I can get at least 10 hours out of a child overnight. So yes, then it's the
even
duration during
a
the day.
young infant, and of course we're talking about
Oh, yes.
these may still be kids who are waking up to feed. It's not necessarily 10
Correct.
uninterrupted hours in a young infant,
Yes,
but 10
correct.
hours of pretty consistent sleep overnight.
Right, right. And then for daytime, my goal is at least 1 hour for the first 2 naps. The later it gets, the cat naps later in the day, those are harder to extend. But I aim for an hour for each of the first 2 naps. Some children are giving me two 2-hour naps. It just depends on their sleep needs. I have a child right now who is 1, and she takes a 2-hour nap and sleeps 12 and a half to 13 hours overnight. It's kind of crazy, but that's just, she's higher in sleep needs, and she tends to do better with an earlier bedtime and a longer night than pushing her a bit.
I think the flip side is, not to condescend to people who do have higher sleep need babies, it can be difficult because they do tend to do a lot of sleeping. And if they're, especially if it's a second or third kid and the family does not always have the luxury of having the child have as consistent as, like with your first kid, as long as you have a parent at home, you have a fair amount of discretion about the timing of things.
Or even a nanny or a babysitter or something. If the child is at home, it's much easier than if they're at daycare. That is where the challenge.
Forget about it. It's just that they're doing whatever the first kid needs them to do. So let's get into a couple of nap challenges here. One is, I know what you're going to say to this. We just transitioned to 1 nap. How long should I let that nap go? I'm worried about it starting to disrupt bedtime. No, hold on. Let's say it together. It depends. So why does it depend?
It depends on their sleep needs. So if the child has transitioned to 1 nap and they're sleeping 3 hours during the day, and then what used to be a 7:30 bedtime is now, and they're not falling asleep till 8:30 or 9, then clearly you're going to have to cut down some of that nap time. Sometimes, so my goal for 1 nap is an hour and a half minimum. And then beyond that, some kids can do 2.5. I very rarely see a child able to take a 3-hour nap and then have a decent night.
I
Some children do, but not. I would say that's more the exception than the norm.
honestly, those were my kids.
Oh, that's
They
amazing.
could sleep from 2 to 5 and be in bed by 7:30.
5 and then
Um,
have it like only be awake for 2.5 hours? Were they up at the butt crack? I feel
my older kid used to take these epic naps. He still is an early to bed kid.
yeah, mine is too.
He's probably on the higher sleep needs spectrum, but I think to the writer of this, it's gonna be obvious, right? If you just track this a little bit, if your kid takes a long nap at night, bedtime's a disaster, you either need to move bedtime later or shorten the nap.
Yeah, I would say, just track the sleep for about 5 to 7 days. Track how long the nap was, track how long nighttime was, and then, like you're saying, I mean, I don't know that many parents that would love to have, like, a 9 p.m. bedtime. So, if you want to have a decent bedtime, you're probably and a bedtime that doesn't drag on, you're probably going to have to cap the nap a little bit. I think it's also important to mention that having an intentional start to the day is really important because if some days your child is sleeping until 7 and then other days you're waking them up at 10, that's going to screw up your entire schedule. So having an intentional wake time, I mean, they say that for adults too who are struggling with sleep, have a regular schedule, even on the weekends. Don't, because otherwise you're and then they're like, the baby isn't falling asleep till 11. Well, yeah, because they woke up at 10. You can't expect that.
Sure. And obviously that's for most of our families, that's not going to be a problem they're going to have, but it will be a problem in older kids. So yeah, I would say that I'd maybe let the kid nap ad lib, see how bedtime goes. If you want to if you have to adjust bedtime 30 minutes later and that works for you, it doesn't really matter. But
Right.
if it's you're seeing prolonged awakenings in the middle of the night or a really delayed sleep onset, those are the signs that the nap is too long. And again, it's the idea of 24-hour sleep. Are you taking sleep from the nighttime sleep period and putting it during the day? That's when it's a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up too, because I find that sometimes, well, a lot of times it's bedtime struggle, like sleep onset is just pushed way too far. Sometimes children are waking up for 2 hours in the middle of the night because they've gotten too much sleep during the day, or they're waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning. So again, it goes back to that distribution of 24-hour sleep.
So here's another one. My 2.5-year-old is in full nap boycott mode at home. It's been going on for almost 2 months. He still naps at daycare for 4 days a week, but refuses at home, often sobbing and screaming. We had a new baby recently and changed daycares as well. He's clearly exhausted. What do we do? This is from Morgan.
Oh, Morgan, I'm so sorry. It just sounds like a
Morgan.
lot, especially with a new baby. Um,
Morgan, we have some bad news for you. Your child is giving up the nap.
yeah, if it's
2.5 is not a crazy age for that to happen.
it's not.
Especially with the new baby at home. The reason your child will nap in daycare is because you're not there. And your child wants to spend time with you, especially with the new baby around. And they're kind of getting ready to give up the nap, right? Like, I would wager also on that if the child is napping, the daycare bedtime is probably a little bit later in a scenario like this. I'd say with the new baby, it's important to spend some time one-on-one with your child without the baby, if it's at all possible. Even if it's 20 or 30 minutes a day, expecting that there'd be some quiet time in the afternoon. Kids don't go from napping to not napping smoothly. It's not one day they're like, I feel great. I'm not going to be a jerk during my usual nap time. I mean,
Right.
there tend to be a lot of screaming and crying during that period when they sort of fall apart.
Yeah, and I would say too, if it's been going on for that long, nap regressions, I hate the term regression, but nap regressions do happen. They can coincide with things like a new daycare or a new baby or something developmental. But if it's been going on for 2 months, that's tricky. I agree. I always recommend that one-on-one time, 20, 30 minutes, quiet time instead of trying to force something that's only causing distress at this point. I think the quiet time is more restorative to them than screaming there
And
for
for
however long.
mom and dad as well.
Yes, that's for
Um,
everybody. And I think it's important to note, Craig, I'm sure you've seen this information, but there's the latest research about naps out is actually out of UMass. And what they're discovering is that children give up naps based on brain development. So when the part of their brain that stores memory is fully matured, they are able to drop naps more easily. And that can happen at 2.5 or 5. It just totally varies. So we can look up that research. I can share that with everybody. But it is interesting because I think a lot of times parents are just focused on that age again. Oh, your kid will drop their nap between 3 and 5. There's a variation.
yeah, it's a huge variation. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I have not seen that, but it makes sense. So, yeah, the struggle is real, Morgan. Oh, like, I'm always surprised about how long kids are going to nap in daycare when they won't nap at home. It's just,
Well,
there's the social pressure. If everybody else is doing it, you're going to do it too.
and sometimes that causes a problem because sometimes I had this client, it was just a horrific situation where they were napping her at daycare. She would then not fall asleep till 10:30 at night. She was a complete mess. And they requested that they not nap her. And they were like, no, we can't not nap her. So we got the pediatrician involved. The pediatrician was like, this is not healthy for the child. And they're still like, oh, well, we believe that children this age need a nap. Daycare is great. And we've talked about this before. My daughter was in daycare from 4.5 months on. It's hard, but it's very tricky for some children when it comes to sleep because either they're napping when they shouldn't, or they're like dropping a nap when they shouldn't, but I do agree there is like a pressure because everybody else is sleeping. They make the room dark, especially on one nap.
Yeah, nothing exciting
It's
is
just
going
quiet
on.
time. Nothing's going on. Plus, they get a lot of stimulation at daycare. That's one thing
Yeah.
that you may consider, Morgan. And a lot of parents don't realize this. Children get a ton of stimulation at daycare, physical and cognitive. And sometimes on the weekends, we're tired as parents. They're not running around for 4 hours before they try to nap. Consider something like that. See if that might help. In some cases, it does. Get outside.
Yeah.
Fresh air is always good too.
You can put your kid in like a gymnastics class or something. But
Yeah. Swimming.
that being said, it is hard to mimic the degree of stimulation you're going to get in school. It's just
Definitely.
dealing with all the kids and stuff like that. Yeah, it'll get better in about 6 months. Okay. Bedtime timing and adjustments. As kids grow, how do you know when it's time to shift to a later bedtime? My toddler's bedtime is still early, but I've heard bedtime before 9 p.m. is ideal. What does the research say? So I guess let's start. How do you know when it's time to shift to a later bedtime? It's usually when your child can't fall asleep at their previous bedtime. And I'd say consistently. Anybody's entitled to a bad night of sleep once in a while. But if your bedtime was 7:30 and all of a sudden consistently it's creeping a little bit later, you hear your child babbling, talking to themselves, playing in their room till 8:30, maybe you want to move the start of the bedtime routine a little bit later.
I have no problem with babbling and playing and falling asleep for an hour,
Oh,
whatever. If a child is like screaming, crying, or just completely fighting bedtime for a long time, then I would say you probably want to look at that. You may also want to look at the daytime sleep again, like look at that 24-hour sleep, determine maybe we could shave a little time off down here and push bedtime out a little later because children can stay awake longer as they get older.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say that I like kids to fall asleep within 30 minutes of lights out. Even if they're playing, talking, etc. Maybe they're talking or whatever, but I feel like that can become a problem pretty soon if they're in there for an hour before they fall asleep. Bedtime before 9 p.m., there's nothing magic about 9 p.m. per se. There was a study out of Scotland about 10 years ago that said if kids going to bed before 9 p.m. actually had better kindergarten preparedness, but the kids who went to bed later. We're talking about toddlers here. 9 p.m. is quite a late bedtime for a toddler or preschooler. I know, Ariel, you had sent me this meta-analysis that I'm going to put in the show notes that showed
Mhm.
that earlier bedtimes led to more sleep in kids. This was a study looking at non-medication interventions in healthy children, and they had about 15,000 children in this meta-analysis, which is a combination of multiple studies. In this particular study, they were showing that it was secondary school, mostly in a little elementary school, the earlier bedtimes were more effective and not younger kids in that meta-analysis. I know that you're a big fan of early bedtimes for infants. There was a study out of Penn State that was looking at infants aged 6 to 24 weeks, and it found that bedtimes before 9 p.m. were associated with 78 more minutes of sleep. And the interesting thing I found about the study actually was, again, it's a small study of 24 kids. If with each hour earlier of sleep, each, sorry, with each moving a bedtime 1 hour earlier, the wake time was only 8.4 minutes earlier. So it's not, this kind of gets into it. It's not always as linear as you want it to be. If you have an early morning awakening kid, moving the
Mm.
bedtime later doesn't necessarily help that much.
Yeah. So this is why the it depends thing is such a huge thing. And again, yes, I feel like I was way more into early bedtimes for everyone in the first part of my career. At this point, I've really dug into this 24-hour sleep, the notion of 24-hour sleep, and it doesn't lie. Like it just is what it is. And so some kids will sleep from 6 to 7, literally, or 6 to 6. Others, you cannot put them down before 8, or they're just they're up at 5 or 4. And you just have to, it's so nuanced. It's so nuanced.
Oh, yeah. No, it is. I will say most parents, again, you're probably not listening to this if your kid's sleep is perfect, right? If your kid is struggling to fall asleep at night after the lights are out and it's taking a long period of time, sometimes a later bedtime can be helpful, sometimes not. I'd say usually trying shifting things 15 or 30 minutes later and giving it at least 3 or 4 days is a reasonable thing to do. If things are going great, you don't have to do anything. And most parents, I would say, because my kids are 17 and 14 now, it wasn't hard to figure out when they should be going to sleep. Like outside of the first year of life, which is challenging, after that, for long periods of time, we had the same bedtime, and then they got older and they got a little bit later, and they got older, and got a little bit later. And it wasn't hard to figure out. I feel like if you just pay attention, you're not going to miss something. And your kid's not all, your 3-year-old's not all of a sudden going to start staying up till 10 o'clock at night unless you change something that you're doing.
Or if they're ready to drop their nap, especially at that
Yeah.
age, that's when I start to see that.
I mean, I see a lot of families where we really are working a lot on sleep hygiene, getting devices out of the bedrooms, etc. That isn't the case. Some parents really need to just go through the basics of don't let your kid watch TV to fall asleep. Don't.
No iPads before bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about night waking and feeding. We had 2 questions about this, which are pretty similar. What's the best way to wean at night? What night we need toddler who still wakes at night for a bottle? This is from someone who's ready to make a change but not sure where to start. And here's a more specific one from Pat. My 18-month-old goes down drowsy around 7:15 p.m. but wakes up around 3 or 4 in the morning and won't settle without milk. Any tips? I don't know. How do you like to address this?
I think we've definitely talked about this in past episodes. The way to change it is to stop doing it. And it's up to you to decide which method you want to use with that, because there has to be some sort of behavioral intervention there where either you're doing a camping out method, or you're doing a check and console method, or you're sitting with them and comforting them but not giving them a bottle. There is no way to stop it without stopping it, and it's not going to be easy if a child is dependent on it. That's the way I look at it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that if it's one bottle, it's simpler than if it's 2 or 3. Certainly. There's not a lot of science around this, to be honest. Your child likely is hungry if every night for their entire life they've been drinking a bottle of milk or formula.
Agree with that.
I don't
The
know. I
kid
mean,
is 18 months and they're normally developing and their weight is okay. I don't know. I don't think they
I
necessarily
don't think I don't think they need it either, but it's like 24 hours sleep. You're getting a certain number of calories 24 hours a day. Like you're taking in a look, 2 or 3 ounces of milk is not a lot of calories, right? If it's an 8 ounce bottle, it is a lot of calories. So I'd say if it's 2 or 3 ounces, I just swap it for water and go for it and recognize there's going to be some fussing for a couple of days. I don't think it'll be indefinitely. If your child is taking a large bottle, 6 to 8 ounces, maybe you wean it down a little bit. Ferber talks about diluting it. Honestly, it's just, I've come around to maybe just going cold turkey on this sort of thing and just
I totally agree.
rip off the Band-Aid, just stop it, offer them water. In a week, you'll be done.
Yeah, I think that the slow weaning, it sounds gentler, but you're going to be removing it regardless. And so it's almost like you're prolonging that change because they're like, wait a minute, you're giving me less and less and less if you just take it away. In so many cases, I have parents that stop it and they're so scared about it. And the child just gets through it in a night or two. It's like way less intense for them than it is for the parent. There's so much anxiety around it. Always talk to your pediatrician. If your child has weight gain issues or any other health issue, perhaps they might need a bottle. In a normally developing toddler toddlers don't eat great anyway. I think Dr. Porto talked about that.
Yeah, they don't.
But always, if you're worried about it, talk to your pediatrician. If they say there's no concern, then you're just going to have to get rid of the bottle in some way, shape, or form. And that's really up to you which method you want to use.
Yeah, if your child's growing normally, have at it. You probably know if your child has growth problems.
Yeah.
And that's a different ballgame. So we have a bunch of questions about night wakings and regressions. Here, do you want to read one?
Sure. Let me get in here. Night wakings and regressions. Okay. From Tired Mom Becky. My 4-year-old used to sleep through the night, but for the last 7 months, she's been waking 2 to 6 times a night. She falls asleep on her own, and we've tried everything. Rewards, bedtime pass, even went to a sleep clinic. Nothing's helped. We're totally stuck.
Yeah, this is a scenario where I am maybe looking a little bit for a medical issue. And I don't mean a terrible medical issue, but if she snores, could she have sleep apnea? Could she have periodic lead movements of sleep, which are associated with restless leg syndrome? If she's moving a lot during the night or complaining that her legs are bothering her, is her sleep opportunity too long? This is another one. Like if this kid has a 12-hour sleep opportunity and if you plot this out, she's sleeping for 10 hours, I might shorten her time in bed. But for kids like this, where parents are doing everything right, she's falling asleep independently. It sounds like they've got a good bedtime routine. They're still waking up a lot. The sleep duration is age appropriate. I can see if you've been to a sleep clinic, you can consider a sleep test and maybe shortening the time in bed. I don't know what you would add to this.
I mean, always medical would be my first question for this sort of situation. I would also want to know if they're napping. If they're napping, then I would assume a sleep clinic would be looking at that, but can't really make assumptions about anything. If they're napping, then I would probably be recommending we drop that nap or at least cap it to a very short amount of time to see if that made a difference. I also wonder what's being done when she wakes at that time. Is mom or dad sleeping with her or offering something? Is it a power struggle that
is she waking up? Wake up 1, wake up 2, wake up 3 till you take her back to your bed.
Exactly.
That probably has a behavioral layer to it. But
the other thing I think about, Craig, is I just used this recently, thanks to you. If there's a sleep anxiety going on there, I just used Huggy Puppy with somebody and it worked literally in one night. We were having the very similar problem. Child is just under 3 and we used Huggy Puppy. It turned into Huggy Bunny because they didn't have a puppy on hand. And it worked amazingly well. The child was struggling. Dad's a surgeon and he was working late nights. He was missing dad and bedtime was taking forever. He'd wake multiple times or wake at like 3 a.m. and be awake till 6. And we had tried everything. We had dropped the nap, which made a difference initially, but then this came back up. We gave him Huggy Puppy and it was incredible how quickly it worked.
Yeah, Huggy Puppy, just briefly, is an intervention that was actually created in an Israeli sleep doctor named Avi Sadeh for refugee children who had a lot of and experienced a lot of trauma. And you give a child a stuffed animal and you give them a script that they have to, the stuffed animal is very scared and you need to comfort them at night. And it just kind of works. I'll put a link in the show notes on how to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's a lot of fear, that's a great suggestion.
You might also consider the bedtime pass. That's
Looks like they
sometimes
did it.
helpful.
The
Oh,
kids
did they?
bedtime
Oh
pass.
boy.
Yeah, that's why I
Switched in
feel
all
like
the
there's
things.
like,
Oh yeah, bedtime pass. Kids can either they work or they don't. Like some kids don't give two hoots about that.
rewards are tricky to implement.
They are
correctly.
tricky.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I'd look for the medical stuff, maybe shorten the time in bed. And if there's fears, try the Huggy Puppy. So listen, we got another one from Pat here, who double dipping here. My
You want me to
daughter
read it? You got it.
just turned 4, wakes between 4:30 and 5 in the morning, and refuses to stay in the room till her hatch light turns green at 6. It's waking everyone up, including her baby brother. We're trying a reward chart and rereading your book. Oh, thank you, Pat. But we're exhausted. Help.
I think it's similar questions. Is she napping? And then the other thing is there's a new sibling there.
I have one, actually. I find that the hatch light, there are many products like this. There are night lights that change color when it's time to get up. And this is based on some work. I'm blanking on the name of the guy out in Nebraska who's a really smart sleep psychologist. I'm going to I'll put his name in the show notes because I'm embarrassed that I can't remember. His first name is Brett. He invented this thing called Brett Kuhn, the morning light protocol, which is what this is all based on. So I would say that if your child is waking between 4:30 and 5, and you have the hatch light set till 6, it's too long a wait for your child to stay in bed. And what you need to do is you need to rig this game. It's a game, right? And the child wins the game by waiting till the light turns green and coming out of the room. You need to rig the game so that your child can win. And a 4-year-old expecting them to lay in bed for an hour and a half is not a game they can win. So I might start setting the hatch light to 5:10 and offer a lot of positive attention when she stays for that. And then a week, move it to 5:20. And then a week, move it to 5:30. And then just go slowly. So the goalposts, she's building up this muscle of either sleeping a little bit later or just being able to spend some time in the room. Obviously, you want to reward your child when they win the game. And you're probably not going to want to light up firecrackers or anything like that at 5 in the morning. Say, oh, wow, what a good job you did. I'm so proud of you. Offer some positive attention. I do think that part of what we're missing here too is the schedule. And it might be that this kid is, why is this child waking up? Is she just getting enough sleep? Is she sleeping from 7 to 5, which is 10
That's
hours
what I
of
was
sleep, and
wondering.
she needs a
Yeah.
later bedtime? That is one possibility. Another could be is she's not really ready to wake up, but she might hear you getting up and feeding the baby. And then you get up. A sound machine might be helpful in that scenario. Like
Even a sound machine in the hallway.
Yeah.
If the child already has one in their room, it can be helpful to have it outside the room as well.
And what are you offering when they do wake up? Are you like, and again, Pat, I'm not casting aspersions on your parenting. Are you handing her an iPad when you're like, just please be quiet for 30 minutes or something like that? I'm not saying that's because it's something that you do, but I've had a lot of parents do this and offer this sort of reinforcement that is very powerful and not really desirable. Like giving your kid an iPad at 5 in the morning is like too good a reinforcement.
Here's some dopamine.
Yeah, too big a dopamine hit. So those are the things I would try. Early morning awakenings or something.
Yeah.
Here, do you want to read the next one?
Yeah. All right. Question. My 5-year-old daughter falls asleep independently every night and never gets out of bed, but she still wakes frequently, especially after illness, calling for me from her room. Sometimes she'll settle back after a quick check-in, but on rough nights, I end up sleeping with her briefly. Is there a better way to handle this phase? This is from, I think it's Karis.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, lying down with her is a very powerful reinforcement. You mentioned illness. I'm assuming that means just routine upper respiratory infections. and not some other more serious illness. I think that the key for these situations is to offer the minimum you can do without yeah, and get your child to go back to sleep. And it sounds like sometimes you've fallen in the habit of lying down with her, which is it's tough because that's a very powerful reinforcement for night wakings.
I
Um,
think that's one of the hardest because I find that if they're sick, you want to comfort. And sometimes that means I just had a parent recently whose child had an ear infection. She was like, and sleep got even worse. Like at 3 a.m, we were watching Peppa Pig. So like it was just totally fallen off. Children can fall into that. If you have one night sleeping with them, the next day they might expect it. It's just like real quick for whatever reason. That one is a tough one.
I mean, bedtime pass might work well here, and I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's like a hall pass for seeing mom or dad during the night. That might be a good one, a good thing to try as well. Sometimes we call this a phase, right? When your kid starts doing something annoying, let's highlight the positives. Your child falls asleep independently, never gets out of bed. These are all good things, right? So I don't think this is catastrophic here, but it is annoying
I
because
think
the
it's just a
practice,
matter of, go ahead. Sorry.
no way. When your child wakes up for 5 minutes at night, you may be awake for 30 minutes. That's what happens when you become a parent.
I think it's tricky because night wakings are the hardest because your own sleep is so disturbed by it. So I think that's the hardest place to make a change in your own behavior. Bedtime is easy because you're awake. Middle of the night and early wakings are just so tricky because you're tired and you just want to go back to sleep however you can.
Here's another one from Anjo.
Yeah, it looks like
Anjo. Our granddaughter starts sleeping through the night 10 months. Thanks to our podcast.
Yay!
Now she sleeps from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. How can we gently encourage her to sleep a little later in the morning?
Oh, well, if you've listened to us so far, it could be a matter of bedtiming. You may have to shift things a little bit. You know, what can happen sometimes is if a child's an early riser, 5 a.m., often a caregiver will then put the child down way too early for the first nap. And then that sets the stage for the rest of the day, which ends up, you can't really push bedtime beyond 7 because they're toast, because you've started like the naps really early and then the schedule is all off. So shifting that first nap or sticking to the sort of good timing of that first nap can be really helpful. It might not be easy in the beginning just because they may be a little tired when they're going down. So that's one way I often help people with that sort of thing. The other thing is that's 10 hours of sleep. They could be done, or they're just an early riser, which is a stinky thing for everybody. But
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just looking ahead. There's something for next question. Yeah, I think that it really depends on the kid and looking at 24-hour sleep needs. It sounds like the baby's sleeping through the night at 10 months. I don't know if she's 10 months old now or 2 years old or something like that.
I'm not sure either. Yeah.
I think earlier in the podcast, we did cover a lot of different things to try here.
Yeah. All right. I'll ask this next one. So sleep and anxiety and bedtime struggles. Okay. Our 7-year-old is very anxious at night. He asks us to sit outside his door until he falls asleep, which can take over an hour. He also wakes once or twice a week from nightmares and comes to our bed. How can we support his anxious mind while also helping him build more independence? And this is from Anonymous.
So this is something we talked about in an earlier episode with Dr. Danielle Garay. I'm going to link to that in the show notes, but anxiety is common, and separation anxiety specifically, which is what's going on here. This is a 7-year-old. And I would say that, first of all, if there is any history of trauma in your child's life, if they've experienced anything scary, and sometimes trauma can be something that's obvious. We were in a horrible car accident, or it could be something that was very scary to the child. That's something you want to work with a therapist on. If this is just really around bedtime, there's no trauma history, there's definitely some stuff that you can try. I also will share a post about accommodations. There's actually a wonderful book called Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD, which I recommend all the time, by Eli Leibovitz, who is a child study center at Yale, who talks a lot about this. But essentially, accommodations are things that we do to help smooth our child's way through life, right? So imagine you have a child and you make them lunch every day to go to school, right? That's an accommodation because they need something to eat. Now imagine that your child insists that they have to have the bread cut up in a certain way and cut diagonally, and the peanut butter on top and the jelly on the bottom, or they won't do it. If you give in to this every time, that's an inappropriate accommodation because it's just sort of unreasonable. And I'd say your child expecting you to wait 10 hours, sorry, not 10 hours. Your child expecting you to wait an hour outside of the room is really kind of unreasonable, right? It's not practical for you, but you fall into this pattern. So I think that this is a classic accommodation. And really, what you need to do is start changing your own behavior. And this is what Dr. Leibowitz talks about in his book, his parent management training. You cannot change how your child feels. You can change how you respond to it. You can say, you know what, I can't really stay outside of your room anymore. I have some other things that I need to do. I will check on you periodically, and you are safe, but we can't do this we can't really do this anymore. And you might want to plan doing some rehearsal with this. Hey, we're going to do a pretend bedtime, and we're going to have you be in your room without me outside of it, and you're going to pretend to go to sleep for 5 minutes and even offer a reward. Because if let's say, is this just at night, or can your child not be alone in their bedroom? If they can't be alone in their bedroom at all, then you might need to work on that skill before you work on the skill of falling asleep, not being in the bedroom.
I think it's also important to note that the child is going to their bed at least once or twice a week. That's a really important piece of this.
Yeah, and the nightmares as well. I mean, nightmares are, is your child truly having a horrible dream, or are they just anxious? It can be
Yeah.
hard to differentiate.
I do think, Craig, that episode in particular, I refer to all the time, and especially that discussion around accommodations. I think it's hard for us to realize, step back and see what our behaviors are. Instead, we're focused on the child's behavior and how they're acting versus what am I doing to change that? Because the only way you're going to change things is, I think Dr. Garay says this, the only way you're going to change that is to stop your behavior that is perpetuating that particular situation. And that's not to place blame on parents.
No,
We all do that. We all do this. We all make accommodations for our children.
I have a long post about this already, but I think that really you need to start changing your own behavior. The fact is, nothing bad is going to happen to your child if you're not out there. They may cry and they may come out of the room and be like, well, it's bedtime and I'm not doing this anymore. I will check on you, and just, it may escalate a little bit. I would say, if this is not just at bedtime and it's happening during the day as well, I might see if you could work with a behaviorist, like a psychologist or a counselor, if this is permeating daytime as well. If it's just around bedtime, this may be something that you can manage on your own.
All right.
So here's another one. This is a classic, what we call sleep onset association from Charlotte. We built a great bedtime routine for our 2-year-old, and she sleeps in her room on a floor bed, her own room. But she insists on falling asleep while touching us and wakes up at least twice a night. We've been trying the progressive breaks method, but it's escalating her distress. Full meltdowns. Do we stick with it, or is it the wrong fit for her? Do you want to explain the sleep onset association? I kind of like.
Yeah, sure. Sleep onset association is essentially something you have to have in order to fall asleep. Some people, that might be turning the TV on. For other children, for a child, it could be nursing to sleep or taking a bottle to fall asleep and not being able to fall asleep unless doing that. Oftentimes, children need to be walked to sleep, or they'll only take a nap in the car. They need to have that movement. So in this case, it sounds as though Charlotte is the mom. The 2-year-old is requiring touching in order to fall asleep. And essentially what happens is, if they require this at the start of the night and then they wake overnight, they don't yet have the skill to not fall back asleep without that. So then they require it again, and it becomes this. That's essentially.
Yeah.
the whole thing of teaching independent sleep. It sounds like things are going, they're pretty close to good sleep, but this is the last piece of it, that independent sleep piece. This one is tricky because I feel like it really depends on the child's temperament. In some cases, the progressive checks, like I find that some children need quicker check-ins because they escalate too quickly. Other children need check-ins that are much farther apart because they don't even get the time to just like breathe and take care of themselves.
No.
But I think at 2, you could easily do something where you come in and you say, okay, I'm going to sit here for 3 minutes, and you set a visual timer or a timer or something and leave. That's one idea, but it's not going to work for all children because all children, they still may fall asleep. Another thing is camping out. Camping out might be the better method here, but saying, I will sit with you, but you cannot touch me and I will not be touching you.
Yeah. And if you're touching me, I have to leave the room.
I have to leave. Right.
I think 2 is very tough. Like, I would say that progressive breaks is what it is. Let's say it lights out is at 8, and your child falls asleep at 8:30, and you typically lay down with them to fall asleep. Then at 8:15, you leave for 1 minute and you come back. And then the next night you leave for 2 minutes and come back, etc. The challenge with this is ideally when you're coming, your break is short enough that you can come back in the room without your child freaking out. Like if you are leaving the room and that is triggering a total freak out, either the break is too long or it's not the right fit for them. Right. And usually that's a 3 and up kind of intervention, but every kid is different. I know this kid could be 2 years and 11 months old.
Yeah, it's
It
hard
could
to
be
say.
23 months. It's hard to say, but I would say for this particular technique, it's probably not the right fit. I'd say if you tried this for a day or 2, I might give it a week. But if you've been trying for weeks, then she's still crying and crying, it's too long.
Yeah.
The progressive breaks really should be you leave the room, you come back, they're still calm in their bed.
I'd say in the beginnings, they can be pretty upset, but there are children who are like extremely distressed by that. And it almost gets them, like works them into a lather that they cannot soothe themselves no matter what. So that's why it's a temperamental thing. But I think in this case, a camping out method with clear boundaries around it, where I'm not going to sit with you all night and you can't touch me. And if you do touch me, I'm leaving. Maybe it's a timer of I'm staying until X, or I'll stay until you fall asleep. But if you wake up in the night, I'm only staying here for 3 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
That may be a better fit for this child.
Yeah. It's tough. I'd say on the flip side is she's got a great bedtime routine. She's waking up twice a night. I don't know, at least twice a night. Yeah, I think at some point you're just going to have to break the sleep onset association. I've heard this a lot. Kids want to play with their kids.
Hair.
Want to play with their parents' hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a sensory thing.
All right. This last question I found very interesting. This was sent to me on Instagram, and I feel like this is a good one for you. I could answer it too. I was only 7 in 1988, though.
I was in high school.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so this question is about cultural shift and sleep philosophy. So I was born in 1988, and my mom friends and I were talking. Why does it feel like our parents had such an easier time with baby sleep? No white noise, no wake windows, no elaborate routines. They say, we just slept. Are they misremembering, or has parenting really changed that much?
Wow.
Too.
I think there's a couple of factors here. First of all, the further back you go, the more likely it was to have one parent at home full time. Usually the mom, not necessarily, but typically. And that does make things easier in this domain. I also feel like there was not nearly my parents were just not that precious about any of this stuff. Like you were expected to go to bed and wake up in the morning and not bug them. And one thing that I think was very clear, because I was born in the 70s, I love my parents, they're great, but like my parents were not my friend. And I would say that they were softies by the standards of their time, but still that was like compared to parents today, it was a different time. Like they certainly did not fret that. Oh, like, let me give an example. when I was studying for my sleep medicine boards, I was reading about restless leg syndrome, which is a condition where your legs feel like they need to move at night. And they said, oh, children with this often say that say they have too much energy in their legs. And I realized that's what I would say to my parents. And I still get it once in a while. So I had a little bit of restless leg syndrome. And my parents did not worry about this at all. They're like, okay, whatever, go back to sleep. And even if I had bad insomnia, I'd show up downstairs and they'd be like, okay, you want to watch some TV? Or they'd be like, okay, go to bed now. And I didn't feel like their sense of self was particularly tied up in what I did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do.
Well,
Yeah.
I have something to say because I was born in 1981 and I didn't sleep through the night until I was 4. And my parents were beside themselves, exhausted, but there was no talk about any of this. So they didn't know that. And the doctor was like, oh, she's just a kid. She'll grow out of it, blah, blah, blah. And so my mom thinks it's ironic that I'm so focused on sleep. She's like, I could have used you a million years ago when you were a baby. I think there's too much access to
You're gonna travel
information
back
right
in time and put baby Ariel back to sleep. But
Yeah,
then you
right.
would probably wouldn't end up a sleep consultant.
They also would have diagnosed me with some sort of GI issue back then. I not waiting until I was like 10 to do that because clearly my stomach was upset. But we weren't focused. People weren't focused on that sort of stuff. I do think you're right, absolutely right about parenting and schedules. A parent at home or a caregiver at home always. But also, I find I've talked about this before. I hate monitors. I think monitors are like the worst. A sound monitor, okay, I get it. Usually, parents can hear their child if they're really distressed from whatever part of their room whatever part of the house they're in. Video monitors are a little much, and parents focus on a child just even moving around in their sleep, and they think that their child is not getting good restorative sleep. And forget it when it comes to these smart monitors that give you all sorts of information that honestly to me just cause more anxiety. So I feel like I don't think it's necessarily that children slept better. I think it was less access to information and a different community, a different society, the way we were raising children back then.
I will say for older kids, and this is fairly clear, that older kids are sleeping less than they were 20 or 30 years ago. And this is likely
Well,
due to electronics and technology. For younger kids, I don't think it's particularly different, but I do think, yeah, culturally it is different. I think I think some of it comes down to social media and parents feeling like if things are not perfect, often it's easy to make fun of social media, right? But so often what we're presented by it used to be more our friends in the Facebook era, like what our friends would present. And now it's more like these very sanitized images that we have of family life from like influencers and stuff like that, where everything is perfect. And I think that it's this comparison that parents often feel that everybody else is doing it so much better than they are. And of course, there's always been the phenomenon of keeping up with the Joneses, or that guy's got a nicer lawn than me, or what have you. But it's so accelerated now. I would say that I don't think as parents we're any better or worse than our parents were. The culture was certainly different. And that's okay, right?
yeah.
My kids are very different than I was at their age.
Yeah,
And
but we're different than our parents were,
yeah,
you know.
and I think, believe me, when you're a grandparent, you're going to be like, "Oh, that was so easy. Why are you having
Yeah,
such a hard time?" When in reality, that they probably struggled and stressed about it too. But you tend to only remember the good times with
absolutely.
the passage of time.
That's why parents have second, third, fourth children. Forget about the newborn
You got
stage.
an oxytocin surge that makes you forget all the annoying stuff.
Right.
Otherwise, everybody
Exactly.
would just have one baby, and the
Right.
human race would die out.
Right.
But yeah, I think you're doing great. Don't listen to all the boomers. You have their own set of issues.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's all the questions we have. Thanks for listening, guys. You can find me at drcraigcanterbury.com and at Dr. Kenneth on social media. Ariel, I know, has some new handles.
I do. I have my new website is expecttosleep.com, and that's with 2 T's in the middle. And my new handle is expect to sleep again on Instagram.
Okay, thanks for listening. And please share with your friends. It does make a big difference. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks. Bye.